uh, link so I can drop it in the chat. So first thing is just kind of how's everybody doing? Just thinking about the fact that we've been 2 years now we're kind of coming out of stupid COVID land, you know, but it's been I don't know, it feels like it's been a brutal run, and I just trusting that's not just me, right? Curious how you're all doing. Okay, I just dropped the link. A year ago, 2 years ago, man, it's really crazy, isn't it, that we went to online teaching 2 years. It was 2 frickin' years ago. Some of you weren't even here at UVU. Um, no, it's kind of crazy, right? And then, I don't know what happened. I just think it took a big toll. I think in aggregate, it's taken a big, big toll on just everybody. It's just everything's been depressing, Doesn't it feel like that a little bit? Like it's been just a little bit depressing, or maybe depressing as hell. Your mileage may vary, but it just kind of feels like that to me. Like it's been a bit of a slog, and I'm of course, I went through. Everyone's got their own story, but I'd love to just kind of hear how you're all doing. I've had multiple good friends die of COVID. People my age, I guess that's a little more vulnerable, right? When you start pushing 60, that's a more vulnerable age. But I have a number of good friends that didn't make it through. So that's not great. Um, lest we wave our hands and say it was all for nothing. Yeah, I think that could have been far worse if we hadn't done what we did. But it's still exhausting as hell, just to go through it. Doesn't it feel like that? Just kind of fatiguing. But in my case, I went through two spinal surgeries in that same 2 year stretch, both of them vertebrae fusion, spinal fusion surgery, 3 vertebrae the first time in my neck, second time, 2 in my lumbar. That's your lower back. And so I just feel like I've lost, with mobility, either struggling going in and then struggling coming out. That's my own story, and there's much more to it even than that in terms of stress. But I think I'm just trying to say, I think it's kind of a placeholder for everybody. There's been a lot of that kind of bullcrap, just life being life, but exacerbated by social isolation, lack of human touch and things like that. So anyway, yeah. But I keep waiting for the next shoe to drop. Like the next Omicron, whatever that's going to be. And plunge us back into the nightmare or something. I don't know. Anyway, any thoughts on that? Just anything you got to share, that'd be great. I just hope you're doing really sincerely, deeply hope you're doing well, and kind of getting through this thing. And my kind of recommendation, my school recommendation, take it for what it's worth. I'm not, an authority on your life. But when I was an undergrad and a grad student, actually, I never took classes in the summer. I just always felt like you got to recover. You got to have some detox time, you know. So that's my recommendation to you is you're gonna get into kind of adrenal fatigue if you don't give yourself the break. Wherever your break is best spent, most people's best break is in the summer. Work a job, take some time off, get recovered, because otherwise you'll get into a real fatigue zone, and then everything just kind of breaks. Put that just Grandpa Chuck says take summers off. So and yeah, that's what I got. Any thoughts? It's kind of quiet on the channel right now, which is fine. Yeah, Havoc. I don't know. I mean, you gotta gauge where you're at, but I just think that over time you can fatigue out. Steve said, I think COVID's worn a lot of people out, but I'm not sure if we'll ever really get a break from it. We hopefully will end up with seasons, but hopefully the worst is behind us. Yeah, and I agree. I agree. I think that's right on, Steve. I think that there will be little times and seasons of COVID coming back and a little caution for a minute. Unless there's some desperate, absolute, I am legend, zombie apocalypse waiting to poise, to pounce. I hope not. Um, all right. Hunter said, definitely, summer's definitely a good time to develop yourself outside of school, make some good habits. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just saying, just don't forget self care. That's really what I'm really, really saying is don't forget self care. One of the things that I hope we're talking about and that we're also emulating is humanity, right? One of the things that goes south when everybody loses their shiz on social media is a loss of humanity. And one of the ways, I'm just going to do one quick story and then I'm going to roll into whatever our topic is today, which I think is maybe going to be the cuckoo's egg and or open source software. I was down. I had a kind of work schedule break. Not a break in what I needed to do, but a break in like meetings I had to be in and things like that. So I decided, screw it, it's been too long. I'm going to Nico's. So I drove to Provo, went to Nico's, and it was delish. Um, and they've got the best chicken wings anywhere in the valley, including any restaurant with the name Wings or Wing in the name of the restaurant. Nico's has better wings. And I popped out of there and I was like, I'm like eating a decent lunch and going super light on dinner, right? And then I'm not eating breakfast. I'm just kind of like doing sort of like intermittent fasting, but I'm like, I'm going to have a cookie to top this thing off. There's an Arby's over there. So I'm like, Arby's has good cookies. They have their salted caramel chocolate chip. You go get me one of them. So I rolled around and there's a sign on there on the little order thing that says, we're really sorry we're out of roast beef. And I'm like, you're a restaurant called RB. Arby's, RB, roast beef. We have the meats, except today you don't have the meats. But everybody is suffering from supply chain, right? Everybody. All kinds of businesses are suffering. That's why it's taken more than a year to build a dang house and things like that. Anyway, so I went into one of the things that I try to sort of exercise, uh, and I recommend this to you, is realize that you might be the only lift in somebody's day. And when you're dealing with people, especially the ones in the service industry, you can be part of the problem or you can be part of the solution, and you get to pick. There's nothing, you're not forced to be an a-hole because somebody was mean to you that day or because you're frustrated and you're going to, kick a dog. Um, you know, I rolled around. I wasn't interested in a roast beef. I just wanted a cookie. So I just said, I made some crack, at the drive-through. I'm just like, man, you're out of roast beef? And I laughed. I'm like, how's that going over with people? And she's like, not well. I'm like, man, I bet. So I'm like, I just need a cookie. And she's like, we got two kinds of cookies. We got one of each left. I'm like, damn. So I'm like, I'll take the chocolate chip. And I roll around, and this poor girl is like kind of traumatized. And I'm like, so how you doing? You holding up? I mean, I'm sure people are losing their crap on you, right? And she goes, yeah, they are, you know. And I mean, I didn't have to have this conversation with her, right? I'm just like, so are people like really pissed? And she's like, yeah. There was this one guy, he ordered like a double, and I had to tell him, we have enough roast beef left to do a single, but not a double. You are the last, and she's literally saying, you're the last person today who's going to get a roast beef sandwich here. And I'm a big fan of the Arby's roast beef. Let me be clear. Okay. And I said, how do you handle it? And she goes, well, he was all friendly. And then I told him, and she's like, he just is like his whole personality just like changed. And he was like suddenly like pissy and angry and short. And maybe the guy was going low. I don't know. Maybe he had his whole morning wrapped around getting a roast beef. you know. But I realized this was my moment, and I just said, well, you hang in there. Just, it's not your fault. You know that, and they ought to know that. So I'm sorry that people are idiots. You hang in there. And she's like, oh, thank you so much. It was just a little moment. I was just Grandpa Chuck. I just figured, though, you have an opportunity to say something. Are you going to be, you know what I mean? Are you going to be the eighth prick in line who didn't get a roast beef that day? Or are you going to be, just throw a little Mother Teresa on and lift somebody, have some empathy. That's my sermonette, lesson of the day is realize that every person you interact with is an opportunity, um, you know, to lift or to take down or to be a neutral when you could have lifted. That's okay. We cool with that? I just want to recommend that. Really strongly recommend it to you. Um, okay, let me look at the comments. Oh yeah, so Dave, nice. When you plugged the USB incorrectly, we had this conversation, didn't we? Or maybe that was in 3450 about the fact that it actually takes on average 3 tries because you first put it in correctly, but you don't dare push it so you don't break it. So you think it doesn't work. You flip it the other way, it's worse. Then you go back and you go with confidence. And I guess there's your Rami Malek, um, hacker man. Okay. All right. So, Petey, my wife works at Swig. You should see what people say when they don't. Okay. I want please stories, please. Petey, I need stories about what people say when they don't get their morning soda. Are you, and I want to know, are you talking about, like they're out of what they need for their morning hit? Daniel, the customer's always right, except when they're wrong. Yeah, right. Okay. There you go. Thank you, Dave, for the hacker scene. Um, yeah, Andreval, correct on the USB. Spencer, yes. Let's not even get started on Karen. By the way, I will get started on Karen because you know how easy it is to bait me. You realize we don't have Karen without social media, right? Every Karen owes her existence. And I mean that in a big way. Karen lives on a large stage because of social media. There was always Karen, but it was like lowercase Karen. Now in the world of social media, there's an uppercase Karen. I have a theory about Karen. Literally every episode I've seen of somebody videoing some Karen just losing her shiz on camera, it's not stable. And I think there might be some mental health problems. That's my empathetic response to Karen, because I guess I just have a really hard time in my view of the world believing that there are people that are really that malintended and that evil. There must be. I recognize. Remember, I said there are things that I'm definitely wrong, but I don't know what they are. That might be one of them. I think there are people who are just flat out a-holes who are just kind of evil by their nature. I think that's probably true. But mostly, I think there's people struggling with mental health things. Occasionally causes them to lose their crap. You know, I have some family experience with that, which I won't get into on a public YouTube video. But anyway, we can talk. Um, PD, let me see. Okay, Daniel, where are we at? Daniel, one time when I used to work as a head chef, total jerk guy told me that I literally told him. Wait, what does this mean, Daniel? That you used to work as a head chef, which is totally awesome. A jerk guy told you that you literally told him,
No, no,
thank
I was a
God.
typo.
What is it?
I wrote
I don't
I
understand it.
was
I can't
I
parse it,
was
Daniel. But
responding
I
to
want
I was
you have my interest peaked. Okay, PD. Oh, if they're out of syrup or a certain soda, for
you.
me that would be Diet Dr Pepper. That's my nectar of the gods, right? People lose their mind. The swears are flying. Ah, nice, Brandon. Yeah, the coffee out. If Starbucks ran out of coffee, right? I suppose you know. Um, Sam, we need chapter and verse. Okay, we need citation on that one, Sam. someone taking too long putting their bags away at a grocery store, like in their car or like in line, and dude basically just starts throwing punches. Oh, God help us all. God bless us, everyone. Oh my gosh. Braden worked at Fizz. How did we get on this? It's just, this is the best class ever. I just want to say it. It's so much fun. You guys are so great. Braden, I work at Fizz. I've never seen people so get mad at a 10-cent price increase for syrups. They're living large, my friend. Wait, Brad, yeah, I can't hear any audio. I can't, yeah, whoever that was for, I apologize, but I can't hear you over the audio. So you got to drop it. Yeah. But if you can drop it in the text. So and I just saw that, and I'm 2 minutes late on that news flash. But yeah, thank you, Brandon, for the tech support. Oh, a guy told me that I've lost a loyal customer, and you told him, "Thank God." Is that a true story, Daniel? Did that really happen? He said you've lost a loyal customer, and you said, "Thank God." Let's pivot. Let's pivot. This is too good. It's just too good. We need it. But I guess the moral of the story is the meme up on the upper right. You swerve to avoid a squirrel. Unknown to you, the squirrel pledges a life debt to you. This is what I'm talking about, right? In your darkest hour, the squirrel arrives. You just never know. It's karma. I believe. I believe absolutely in karma. This, I don't know what you call it. This karmic principle. It's also known as what comes around goes around. It's also known as the law of the harvest. It's also known as cast your bread upon the waters. It's known actually by a lot of names, and I think that who is it? Daniel, were you the philosophy major previously or philosophy degree? I believe that this idea of karma exists under one name or another in every religious and philosophical tradition in sort of known human history. I think that's true. And when I see things like that, when I see patterns like that, oh, linguistics, I'm giving you like all kinds of credit. I knew it was something unspeakably cool that I also have a great deal of interest in. But yeah. Um, yeah, so fine, get it. I'm fine with that technically from a Hindu perspective. I'm speaking of it in a broader sense, as opposed to sort of Hindu theology, limited to that sort of idea. But that's sort of a broader idea, but the concept is still the same. Okay, let me see. Sam, dude was drunk. The guy throwing punches. CR used to work at a car dealership. Customer came in with an issue on their truck. Sucky situation. The customer swore that I laughed at her when I didn't. Complained to my manager and got the repair done for free. That's cheap. Um, Daniel, I was given authority to say nearly whatever I wanted to customer. The guy was being a huge douche to my servers, and so I kicked him out. Nice. Okay. Yeah, Steve, 20 years ago, we were grateful if a web page loaded in under 5 minutes. Now we get frustrated if it takes 5 seconds. Um, yeah, our need for dopamine and instant gratification has ruined people's good nature and patience. Largely true. Um, Dave, karma is a Ponzi scheme of kindness. Yeah. Or my other interpretation of karma is that it's simply a way of sort of overfitting the data from a statistical interpretation. You do a bunch of good things to people, statistically, good things are bound to happen to you with or without a causal relationship, right? But if you're doing good things and I think when things come back to you, you notice them. When you're basically a douche, then I think that even when good things come back to you, you're not in the mode of recognizing it. So I think there is a sort of a tautological, right? Exactly, Dave. Confirmation bias. That's right. Confirmation bias for the karmic win. I think that to me is at least in operation. That when you're in a mindset of looking for good in people and in situations, that you'll tend to see it. And if you're not, you'll tend to not. and therefore, as you do good, it feels causally like it's, inducing, um, coming around, going around. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's like theologically a true principle in the abstract theological sense, but I do believe that it's a great way to live our lives. Um, yeah, Brandon, maybe karma is the thought, not the action. That when you do something good, you remember good things that you did. Self-confirmation bias. Yeah, right on, right on. Okay, I'm going to pivot. Look, should we talk about Cliff Stall? I want to know, and the deadline for having finished it and written the essay on it is passed, so I didn't like set you up. I'm going to drop a survey. I'm going to ask you. It's just I enjoyed. There we go. I enjoyed the Cuckoo's egg. And again, this is one of those things where if you didn't, that's great. There's no like, point ding if somebody really didn't enjoy it. And it's the kind of thing that I would want to know. I mean, we all know, I talked to you about, wait, did I tell everybody about my career shift? I told you in this class, didn't I? I know I told 3450 students. Did I tell you here? Okay, I have to tell you something. I have a career shift coming up. But before I do that, I have to show you something. I don't think I showed this to you. I'm going to drag it over on the big screen. Oh, no, you know what I need to do? Sorry. I gotta change this. I gotta change the external display. There we go. It doesn't matter much except for just that monitor is closer. Check this out. This is my personal paperback copy of The Cuckoo's Egg, which is, yeah, it's pretty bad handwriting. Okay, let's talk about Cliff. I love Cliffy, man. He is just an absolute original, man. I love the guy. He's also obsessive, right? You've got to be to do what he did. You've got to be obsessive, right? I don't know if you can read this, but it goes for Chuck Knudsen with an exclamation. Here's hoping that you don't go through this nuttiness. Smiles. Clifford. It says stall, but it might as well say like Lewin, or I don't know. It could say just about anything. Yeah, agreed on the worst handwriting of all time. Um, oh, I said wait until April. Yeah, I'm gonna drop it on you right now, Havoc. So here's the deal. How much? Some of you have probably already heard through the grapevine, but I'll just kind of cut to the chase. I am uh, resigning my position at UVU effective, summer, whenever our contracts are up. Casually sips his beverage. Let that soak in. Um, so here's the deal. No, it's not because they don't allow Discord. Although that doesn't help. It doesn't help any. That's not the root cause. No, honestly, I'm up for tenure and was recommended unanimously. So it's not like I have to leave or they're like this is masking some. You know what I'm saying? It's not like there's some kind of masking function at play. I got to get this thing in the right spot. You know what I mean? Sometimes people are like, I've decided to leave the university. Oh, is that because they were going to fire you? That happens. But I'm just saying, that it had nothing to do with that. I could stay pretty much until I'm dead. Um, And, in the 10-year job security thing, I was fine. You know what I mean? Going through would have had tenure by the end of the school year, and then just gone in as a tenured, associate professor coming in the fall. Um, that's it. Havoc. They didn't want to interfere with keeping Santa Claus off the streets where he belongs. Exactly. Exactly. Um, no, it really just came down pretty much to economics. And I hate to say it, but, by virtue of a few dynamics that I won't go into, but which I'm happy to talk about with anybody individually, in case anybody's curious, uh, I've got to think about retirement, and this is not the way to do that with a short clock. But I've been here for 4 years. I have absolutely loved the students and the classroom. The leadership has been great. My boss, Neil, has been fantastic. My colleagues in the department are just great, have been great. The university bureaucracy is a thing of wonder and evil beauty. Um, the bureaucracy here is. I'm going to take my little jacket off to celebrate the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy is definitely an energy suck that I believe works against the fundamental mission of the university. And I'm not trying to pick on UVU. I think it's true of most state schools and less true of private schools. Um, because state schools, in my opinion, uh, optimize they optimize to minimizing the potential for litigation and liability. They optimize the utility function attempts to minimize liability, not to optimize education. That's my belief, and it may be one of the things I'm wrong at. Okay, that I'm wrong about. My sense. So that was definitely a grind, but that wasn't, if I were committed, if I were already sort of like set for retirement, I'd have just been happy to hang out, and do well. Yes, politics are so vicious because the stakes are so small. Okay, now, Dave, I have seen this quote before. Who said it? I'm going to go out on a limb and say Sidney Harris or Einstein. No, somebody can attribute that. I've seen that quote before, Dave. I believe it might have been Einstein. But no, but this, don't misunderstand either. This is not about politics within the academic environment. This is about overhead in the bureaucratic environment, the bureaucracy of the organization. Anyway, it also relates to this idea that I'll call never solve a personnel problem with a policy. If you've got 100 people in a room and one person does something really stupid, take the one person, take them out to the parking lot, get a willow switch, do what you have to do with that one person to speak common sense. It leaves everybody else flexible to do the right thing. But if you try to legislate a rule in place for the remaining 99 who are not a problem so that nobody can make that mistake again, you will also guarantee that a bunch of that 50 great things that happened because there wasn't that policy aren't going to happen now. And you're going to lose customers if you're like in a retail setting. Does that make sense? That's my philosophy. Never solve that. That's the quote. Never solve a personnel problem with a policy. There are exceptions to every rule, and there are exceptions to that rule. Um, yeah, does that make sense? Within the flexibility to try something comes the freedom to do something great. And when you make it so that nothing bad can ever happen, you also make it so that even more good things can't happen. Now, sometimes the bad thing that can happen is just the cost is too high. If you got a kid gets killed crossing a street where there's no crosswalk, I'm a big fan of putting a crosswalk in. I mean, there are situations where the price is high, but I think we have a society, my own opinion, where any bad thing comes to anybody, everybody in political settings have to feel like, well, I've got to do something, right? So, for example, somebody gets murdered, so I got to strengthen the penalties against murder, if that would have helped anything, or I've got to do something. And I've actually had people, where I've been like, do you think that would, like you're going to make this one thing illegal? The thing you're talking about, it's already illegal. Well, and then literally had somebody say in more than one occasion, well, you've got to do something. Well, no, I don't. I disagree. I don't think you have to do something every time something bad happens. Sometimes life just makes bad things happen. And I believe we're in this pendulum swing where you're going to be voted out of office if you don't look like you tried, because otherwise it's clear that you hate children and dogs and pets and whatever the target happens to be. It's bad. It's logical fallacy again is what it is. But I believe it's not a defensible position to say it's okay if a certain number of children fall off a bicycle and break their arms. We shouldn't outlaw children riding bicycles to create what I hope is a fairly harmless example. This is the one that gets me fired before April. No, does this make sense? We've created an environment where nobody can ride a bike because somebody broke their arm once. You know, um, I've got one somewhere. I don't think I'll be able to find it. Maybe I can find it for later, but it's a meme that just says, it was one of those my generation where honestly, the life expectancy. I was looking at this recently, thinking about retirement, but the life expectancy when I was born uh, was 10 years younger earlier than the life expectancy today. Well, there's some reasons for that, seatbelts, riding a bike with a helmet. There's a bunch of things that have actually had, modern medicine. There's a number of things, right? But it basically just said the meme just says, once when I was a kid in the 70s, I died. My mom made me walk it off. There's some of that, that's obviously extreme for comedic effect, but it's trying to make a point, that we somehow, not everybody did survive, but was that a better childhood or not? It's a great question. I don't know the answer to that either. Um, okay, what did they say about that? Dave, I'm looking in the article now. Uh, what they call? I'm looking at the article that Dave just posted. What's the conclusion, Dave? At the end, I'm scanning down. The answer is we don't know. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. And I like that, Dave. In the sense of, go do some research, right? Steve, and then let's pivot to the cuckoo's egg again. In a society where, due to inflation, teachers are being paid 11% less than they were 20 years ago, I would argue that there are no academic politics. I would say, Steve, you have stated two things, one of which I'm trusting is statistically true, and the other one of which does not logically follow. But feel free to I mean, please, I don't mean that like facetiously, like, feel free to make your case, yeah, dummy. No, I mean, honestly, there may be an argument that exists to be made, but I don't think that's it from just a pure predicate logic perspective. Are you saying, well, taking the uncitable, unconcludable quote, since the stakes have gotten smaller and smaller and smaller, then the stakes should be as high as ever. Also, I think there is a difference when people refer to academia. It is broadly teaching, but I think typically they think of it as universities, where the politics are typically about the research dynamics, funding, grants, and less about being a teacher at a public school kind of thing. That's my perception. And again, I can be wrong on that. Um, If academics mattered to politics and politicians, they would think to put value in teaching. Also, I'm going to call you out again, Steve, because I gave you the trophy last time. I don't think that you have evidence that they don't think about putting value in teaching, or that there isn't value in teaching, or that there that they that if there isn't value in teaching, it's because they're not thinking. You're throwing, in other words, you're wrapping a bunch of things up that need to be teased apart. I'm critiquing everybody's predicate logic today, I guess, starting with Steve. Sorry, man. You had the trophy. Remember Cloudy with a Chance of Meatball? This contact lens represent you. My eye represent my eye. I got my eye on you. That's quotable, man. Okay, let me see. Matthew, and then Steve, seriously, I love and respect you, so just keep it coming, and I'm just gonna, push a little bit to try to get some clarity in the point you're actually trying to make. Matthew, I definitely, uh, okay, what do we got here, Sam? There we go. Thank you for the GIF on that one. Um, Matthew, I definitely like what you said about policymaking. If we try to minimize all risk, sounds to me like minimizing all stretching and growth as well. A lot of positive change comes from taking risks, although it's good to be wise about which risks we take. Absolutely. We can't, we can't prevent all negative things from happening in life, but our goal is to do even more good. Right. And there is this thing, when I was a kid, there was a thing we didn't call it free range parenting. We just called it, I mean, I'm serious. I don't mean to be like back in my day, but in the 70s, when I came into my teenage years, um, this was small town Iowa surrounded by cornfields and soybean fields. And, you know, I was 12 years old and we'd grab our rifles and take off walking across fields and down the railroad tracks, trying to shoot something we could eat, bring home for dinner. Barring that, we just walk along the railroad tracks and find pop cans and beer cans and stuff that we could shoot. And in the middle of the winter, like literally just trudging out there, no food, no water, didn't think about it. We understood gun safety, but I'm just saying, crap happens. And anyway, we now have to give a term to kids just out in the front yard being kids. We have to call it free range parenting, and someone's going to call the cops. It's kind of gotten a little weird from where I'm sitting. I feel the pendulum has swung, I guess, is the bottom line. Um, okay, let me see. Where are we at? Oh, I never said no. Hang on. Brandon, I just clicked your no on number 5. I didn't tell you what the career transition was. So I did say, okay, Brandon, I did say that I'm leaving UVU after 4 glorious years, and I've had a blast. And the students, you guys are the best part of it, and the classes have been the best part of it. Um, oh man, bassist for Neon Trees. I would love that. I would really, really love that. I don't have the schedule freedom to do that. Um, but no, but interestingly, Dave, I do know the father of the original bassist for Neon Trees, the Neon Trees. Yeah, no, I actually do know the father of the original bassist for Neon Trees, who I have also played in bands with, but back before I played the bass. Okay, yeah, yeah. So no, okay. Is anybody familiar with a company called SoFi? That is capital S, little O, capital F, little I. SoFi. Yeah, they were the name. They were the name on the LA Rams football stadium for the World Series, for the Super Bowl, for the World's Bowl, for the Super Bowl. That's SoFi Stadium. Yeah, refinancing student loans. Um, um, yeah. So yeah, Josh just said, been watching and listening to cases where kids are kidnapped, so I understand about the free range parenting. Yeah, and I, as a kid in LA, we actually were trained by our parents about how not to be kidnapped. And all 5 of us kids, because this was the 60s, before I moved to small town Iowa when I was 10, all 5 of us children had been uh, had attempted abductions in LA. Great place to raise a family, apparently. Um, and then it was a bit of a shift when we got to Iowa. Okay, Steve. Okay, I'm back to Steve, and then I'll tell you. So I'm going to SoFi. So Steve said, "Fair, I might be in the minority here, but I can't remember within the last 10 years a major emphasis of funding going towards schools. Also under the impression that teachers should be one of the highest paid jobs in the world." Okay, here's the deal, Steve, and we can come back to this maybe since we're very much far afield. There is an issue of supply and demand. If there are now you understand too. There's another interesting thing. There's a notion of supply and demand and a scale that you can look at. If you're going to say the best teachers, no question that they should be making the best dollars in the market. The problem is that the barrier to entry to being a teacher, and I'm just talking about inherent ability, is very low. It's a little bit like the barrier to entry to being a software developer is very high. That's why your starting salaries are so high. It's a lower barrier of entry to be a software tester. So the salaries are lower as starting positions. In the ultimate sense, to be a great tester and a great developer are comparably difficult tasks. And so on the high end, they tend to be more or less equivalent, except that testing always tends to lag because of the perception that's built from this barrier to entry, which is lower. Does that make sense? So the barrier to entry to be a public school teacher is an undergraduate degree in education. You get elementary ed and you can be a teacher with an undergrad. Okay. To be a professor in a university, you wind up having to have a PhD, which doesn't make you a great teacher by any remote stretch, but neither does an undergraduate degree in education. And so this is the struggle. It's not on balance. And I don't mean to offend anybody who either is or wants to be or their parents are. I have many good friends, but I'm just saying I have no problem having that conversation when you talk about the great teachers. Um, I do have a problem with the suck teachers, and then you've got a tenure system, largely fostered by the teachers' unions, that make it very, very difficult to hire bad teachers. So at the end of the day, in my opinion, and again, I can be wrong, in my opinion, if you want to have a system that truly rewards, there I am. Thank you, Dave. Oh, Dave wins the chat. Sorry, Steve. Dave has taken home. There's nothing Dave can do for the rest of today to lose the chat at this point. Okay, trophy in hand, flicking my guitar picks. You know, no, Dave. That just makes my day, man. What was I talking about? No, right. So, Steve, I hope you understand. And I'm coming back to your comment. What I'm coming back to is when you have a system that, courtesy of the teachers' unions, largely makes it very, very difficult to fire bad teachers, you artificially depress the value to all the teachers, especially the great teachers. If you had an easy ability to get rid of bad teachers, the market would, I think, more readily adjust to compensating fairly the great teachers. Okay, then Steve said, how do you determine what makes a great teacher? Very difficult. That's the other part of the problem, Steve. I think you do have to differentiate crappy teachers from great teachers. And then in terms of understanding the market, and then you have to say what makes a great teacher, what makes a bad teacher, and how do you assess that objectively and in a fair way. And again, when you've got a system that is so likely to, implement all kinds of policies, you also limit the ability, to be a great teacher. So it is really wrapped up in a catch-22. Man, I'm still just reeling over Dave's. Where are we at here? Hang on. All right. Okay, let's get off this. Steve said the teacher who has thus far taught me the most was my first English professor at UVU. Taught English through life skills such as bias, metacognition, teaching that there's other opinions and perspective in the world other than my own, right? Like unto mine. Yeah, but again, it's a market. It's a market demand and supply and demand. It is, and I'm going to probably be offensive to. I have friends who teach English universities. It is easier to get a credential that allows you to teach English at a university than it is to get a PhD in computer science in order to teach at a university. And I'm not saying which one's better, more valuable. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying one of these, and there are many, many, many more people with adequate teaching credentials in English than in computer science. The other thing you have to look at is what can they do if they weren't at the university? If they were me, I could leave and multiply my salary by some non-zero integer. Okay. See what I mean? If you can leave the university and triple your salary, then you have a supply and demand that's working in your favor. If you can't leave the university and make any better money than you're making at the university, then there's a market dynamic that's at play. Okay, let me move off this. I hope that makes sense, Steve. And again, coming back to the topic of the entire class, nuance. It's a nuanced conversation, and you've got to be able to hold multiple things in your head at the same time. You know, like great teachers. The other thing too, Steve, do some research. Really great teachers who stay in the system a long time, or actually good and bad teachers who stay in the system a long time, get to a point of some pretty dang decent compensation. The other thing you have to look at is what's the curve. You guys get degrees in computer science, undergrad degrees from UVU, and when you get your first job, it's going to be between $60,000 and $100,000 because the demand is so high and the supply is so low, right? With teaching, you start off desperately low. Also, insurance salesmen. I have some friends that are insurance salesmen. If you stay in it, longevity, you get to a very healthy income. But right out of the chute, it's not very high. So you got to also differentiate where you are. And then if you understand statistics and you're dealing with some curve that's changing, what's the central measure? What's the characterization of that curve? The first quarter of it, the middle half, the last quarter, the average of the whole thing, depending upon the curve, that might not make any sense at all. Average might not even be the right statistical measure. So it's a really hard problem to get our heads around. It could be our end of the curve, but again, that's one way that might be the trick, Brandon, but it might not, depending upon what it is you're looking at. Yeah, but again, I don't think that's a bad idea, Brandon. Although it's still going to give you an aggregate measure, and it's going to include bad teachers as well as good. It's still going to not save you from certain struggles. Okay, Cuckoo's egg, stall. What was the vote? I think everybody liked it, right? Did anybody vote no? Oh yeah, so I'm going to SoFi. Yeah, we had 18-0 on the Cuckoo's egg. That's great. I'm going to SoFi. I will be the senior manager working in their data infrastructure. That's the stuff that basically allows people to make the right decision when they do the predictive analytics and other kinds of things of that sort. So it's my first time back in a company of that size for quite some time. And my first time actually out of academia back into industry in 4 years. So I'm excited. All right, Andreval read the whole thing in 24 hours. Yeah, what do you think about the overall themes of the Cuckoo's Egg? Things that I want to just hit me with what you think might be themes that are meaningful. I'll tell you what I think mine are. But let me just give you a minute to drop your themes or ideas that popped out of it. And sorry for the Yeah, they sucked at passwords back then. That's right. The advanced, let's call that the historical march of security. Yes, so bad. So very, very bad. Yeah, the government liked to talk in circles. Still true, Sam? Still very true. Let's see. Keep it coming. Hang on a second. Just a second. Okay. Where am I? Sorry. Um, Spencer admired him for sticking with it even when rejected by those who could help him the most. Yeah. Grateful for GUIs. Oh man, Hunter, yes. Last time printers were useful in the 80s, were useful was in the 80s. False, but good try, Sam. But I appreciate the spirit of what you're trying to say. Well, I should say this. The last time we were truly just dependent upon printers, they're still useful. The last time we were truly dependent was in the 80s. Dave, network security is valuable, is valuable. Oh, valuable. You edited on me. Beyond the economic sense, a community is built on trust. Network vulnerability erodes trust, threatens the community. Yeah, nice. Brandon, showing the capabilities of someone who's willing to follow a trail of crumbs. Right. I mean, the analytical ability of Cliff is like fantastic. The forensics, you know what I mean? Him kind of chasing this thing down. He was borderline obsessive. Okay, to which I only have to say, Brandon, borderline? Borderline obsessive? No, I think he was all the way over the line, man. But I think it's a great thing. I mean, you want to build software, you ought to have that level of obsessiveness. You can't just be like, yeah, close enough. A bit that's supposed to be on is off, and a bit that's supposed to be off is on. That's maybe a really bad thing, even though your 99.99 of the bits are correct. Let's see. Learn computers to a master level by his deep dive. Yes. Okay, I want to talk about that for a second. Brandon said that he kind of reached this master level, right, of computer proficiency by diving in. This is the ethic, okay, career wise. This is the ethic you guys have got to have. And I'm sure I talked about it. I know I talked about it in 2810 for those of you that had 2810 from me. You can't just get to a design moment or a code moment or a problem moment and just go, you little kid that's like, me poopy, and looking for a diaper change, you can't operate like that. And this relates to the orders of ignorance. You may not know going in what the answer is, but you will when you're done. But it's not because you know it going in, and it's not because anybody taught it to you. It's just because you figure out, like, well, what do I know? Right? So I told you the story. If you were in 2810 with me, I told you the story that there's one project we do that's a little bigger than the others. And I remember the first time a student says, what do we do with that? I don't even know where to start. Okay, and I'm just going to call bullcrap on that. You know, I did at the time. And then later on, I would make it a standard speech where I would say, no, that's bullcrap. You don't know how to finish, but you do know how to start. I don't know how to finish either. You know, this was a project that I had coded a couple times. I still didn't know how I would do it if I wanted to do it again. I'd probably do it differently every single time because all I really am doing is saying, well, what do I know right now? Well, I know that this thing has three major functions that kind of are organized in a pipeline. Okay, then let me start architecting that as a pipeline. Or maybe I know that that this is a network protocol, and so I know some things about protocols, but I don't know the rest. Or I know that this thing kind of lends itself to a model view controller kind of architecture. Fine, you know, but I know something. That's where I start. Then I do a thing, and then I go back and I cycle back on it. Now what do I do? Now what do I do? Now what do I do? And you keep cycling back around, back around, back around. Um, yeah, but that notion that if you ever have the temptation to say, I don't know where to start, just slap yourself, okay? Because that's bullcrap. Just remember, Dr. K calls bullcrap on that because it's your job to figure it out. Like Cliff Stahl he didn't know the answer. Nobody knew the answer to that when he started. I really, really like that comment, Brandon. If it hadn't been for Dave's championship graphic construction, you'd have, well, okay. Um, 2 points to Slytherin. Okay, Brandon. How about that? Um, Matthew, fascinating to learn about the older technology and network technology in general. Do you remember when he talked about the deck writer? I don't know if you remember that. It was basically a keyboard with a box of paper underneath it, and then the paper would come up. It was a dot matrix printer, dot matrix, dot matrix, and it would go jing 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 jing, and that was like a screen refresh. Then you could type and every screen refresh when you're doing it like in GUI mode would kind of come up, and that would be your screen. You could look at it, and then you burned a lot of paper, but you feed that paper through with the little side punchy jiggies, you know, where you have when you do printouts, you'd have to like tear the things off the. That was still in many printers even 20 years ago, still a thing. Anyway, that was the first one that I ever used in our computer club in 1973, 4, whenever we had that computer club at Jessup High. It was a deck writer, dot matrix. Matthew, main themes I got. Computer networks should be about trust, and hacking is breaking that trust by definition. So should it be though? I'm going to challenge you, Matthew, on should be. Says who? Because I would disagree. But I think it could be true if you use different words. Like, it would be amazing if we lived in a world that doesn't exist in which networks were about trust. But it's not a real world. That's the problem. But it would be great. So I'm challenging your use of should. Okay, Matthew, and then feel free to come back at clarifying what you mean by that. Hacking is breaking that trust by definition. I agree with that. I agree with that completely. Even if it's white hack. I can't talk today. White hat versus black hat. You understand, right, that with black hat hacking and white hat hacking, the only actual difference between black hat and white hat is what your motivation is. Skill set's the same. Some of the behaviors are the same. And there's kind of gray hat, right? Where the white hat's like you're hacking, you're a good guy, you're hacking for a reason. Black hat, you're trying to tear down civilization, or you're anarchist, or you're a capitalist, uh, you know, trying to scam people, make money, or whatever your motivation is, selling secrets. We're taking security measures to prevent hacking. Yeah, absolutely, Matthew. Uh, Matthew said, at least back when the book was written, there was little support for computer security. Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. There wasn't really a thing. It really wasn't a thing. Brandon, possible ways to track someone. Worse today, given all the layers of abstraction on top of new technologies. And let's even forget the networking records that are kept, but let's talk about social media and things like that, Brandon. In other words, absolutely, and that's only a fraction of it. I think I'm going low here. Hang on. Water, sadly. Steve said, I think it's a great story of perseverance, following the breadcrumbs, almost to a fault. I like Dave's perspective of network security. Shows that seemingly small problems like a leak could result in catastrophe. Yeah, yeah. Um, do you remember in the Triumph of the Nerds, it was Andy Hertzfeld, who said that with respect to Steve Jobs, that there was no problem too small, and it was never too late to get it right. And I think, no, was it Andy Hertzfeld or was it the guy who was working there after school? I think it was that guy. I can't remember his name. Um, you know what I'm talking about? If you're going to be if you're going to be great, you have to have that attitude. Then there are times where you say, despite all of that, I have to move on. I've got to, I got to ship, you know, because sometimes there's risks to not shipping, just like there's risks to shipping. When those curves cross, right, when it's a greater risk to not ship, that's probably when you need to ship. When the risk of not shipping is higher, you're mitigating. You're always in risk management in software because you're never perfect. You never got it perfect, ever. Sorry, man. I'm fading. I'm going to go into like sleepy time nap. Pretty soon, the hand comes up. Yeah, you know where this is going. Hang on. It's just a black currant pastille, but it might just fake my body out. Um, Hunter, it's mixed experience in astronomy and computers made a unique creativity. Yeah. Absolutely. The other thing that I would kind of say is it's really worth just thinking about the way we approach our jobs, our careers, our learning. Um, because part of the reason that I don't think I'm being rough on you, but I think that I'm trying to be a little bit persnickety, a little bit pedantic to say, like earlier when I was calling Steve out, who I really respect all of you, but in particular, I respect Steve, but I called him out in part because I respect him. But I'm also trying to say, no, get more precise in our expressions, you know, get more precise in the way we express ourselves. We do a lot of hand waving. We do a lot of hand waving with logic. We buy into logical fallacies. We get super weak about a bunch of things. Well, let's get better at that. Get better at our communication. Get better in our language expression. Are we willing to just say blah blah blah, hand wave blah, or are we willing to say no? Let's take that seriously. My recommendation is to take it seriously and get better over time. Dave, bend the rules or die in the status quo. Yeah, it's also true. It's also true. Brandon, on a funny note, it was funny to hear him BSing his job in order to do his passion and track. Yeah, yeah. Matthew, it's impossible for there to be complete trust on computer networks. Correct. Agreed. I totally agreed. In the current state of our world. Yeah, I felt like Stahl was saying networks should be about trust. And while I think that'd be amazing, I think we need a lot of protection still. We need a plan for hacking. Yeah, agreed. That's absolutely correct. Matthew, there may also be a place for white hat hacking. The reality is there absolutely is a place for white hat hacking. There are companies that will actually attempt to hack their way into your system in order to test it. That is almost the archetype of white hat hacking. What about this one? Remember the orders of ignorance we talked about? You remember all that at the very beginning, the fish, the orders of ignorance? And we talked a little bit about how as computer science types, you often come into this world of CS. I mean, into the world like being born, but you come into CS often bringing a propensity toward more black and white thinking and more of a struggle of living in ambiguity and living in the gray zone. But the world actually plays itself out in the gray zone. The actual world is a world of grays. Precious few blacks and whites, in terms of extreme, whatever that represents. Clear delineations. The world really is consumed in a sort of a really kind of a non-binary reality. Um, there are very few people that I would say are, you know, like I talked about earlier with the Karens, right? That are consumed with evil. I don't think there. I think there are, but I don't think there are very many. Everybody else is really kind of doing the best they can, and most of the Karens are having a bad day, and they're probably not pleasant people. Maybe on a good day, I don't know. Depends on the individual. But there are people who something happens chemically in their brain. Some of you know these people. Um, Something happens chemically, and then it's like a different person. And I've had some up close experience with this. And man, it's hard for me to say that's an evil person. I can say there's a really good person who sometimes when the mood is just right, that it goes full Karen, and you're like, whoa. But then based on certain mental health conditions and struggles and things, maybe some of you struggle with that, where you're just like, I really regret how I act in that situation. Maybe when you have not had your morning coffee, you haven't had your morning fizz. Maybe it's you or whatever. You know what I'm just saying? That most people are a combination. But we want to put everybody into buckets. These are the good guys. These are the bad guys. We want to do that, but the world doesn't really fall out that way. Which again, it's something I've harped on. Cliff began to evolve in his thinking, right? And what was his girlfriend's name? Martha? His partner? Well, that was Martha. When she's like, how do we know these guys aren't on our side? Like, what does that mean? Hacking is okay if you believe in the cause. It's not okay if you don't believe in the cause, you know. But there are conditional situations, right? When Stuxnet, which I'm still in the middle of the book that I started reading a little while back called Countdown to Zero Day. If we've got, if somebody's like, there are hackers, Anonymous and other hacking groups that are like going after Russia right now. And, those of us that are kind of like Team Ukraine in this whole thing are just going, hell yeah, take them out. But if they did the same thing and attacked maybe the U.S. government, then maybe I think we would be more split. Some of you would still be like, hell yeah. And others maybe would be like, or if they were then attacking your personal account in order to spam you or steal your money, you'd be like, no, this is bad. So do you see what I mean? Um, there are situations in which the same behavior might be, good under one situation and bad in a different situation, depending on on the circumstances, right? But the whole point that she was, that Cliff says makes a statement somewhere down the stretch about how I'd stopped sort of seeing the world as black and white. I just saw people trying their best and doing their thing. I think it's harder to hold on to because there's more nuance. And in order to have a nuanced conversation, you have to hold more ideas in your head at the same time. It's easier to just say, Democrat, oh, trying to destroy America. Republican, trying to destroy America. That's so intellectually weak. And by the way, if you want to really get my goat, if I had a goat, I had goats once. But if you want to get my goat that I don't have, use like pejoratives, like refer to Republicans as repugs, or sorry, I just dropped something, or repugnance. That's bullcrap. I'm calling bullcrap on that. Democrats. What are some of the other pejoratives? You know what I'm trying to say, right? Democrats. Yeah. Right. This is what I'm talking about. It is so not useful. Again, I'm a radical centrist, so call me what you want. And I have really, really dear friends, across the political spectrum. I keep those friends to temper me, to keep me balanced. But dismissing, you know, dismissing entire groups of people and questioning their humanity and questioning their integrity, and look, they might just have a different view of how the thing should fall out, and be sincere. And you might also say, okay, I grant your sincerity, but I just don't think it's a good idea. You know, you might sincerely want, a Nazi government, and I can respectfully disagree with that, you know. But I can still say it's a weird worldview and not one that I understand, but I'm willing to say, you know, that's your thing, man. You're not a majority. That's for dang sure. It's an extreme minority, and thank goodness. But does that make sense? Um, Headline reads: UVU professor says America should be Nazi. But most of that kind of crap also happens as a byproduct of black and white thinking, which is not a sign of robust thinking. When you can't have a nuance, when you can't introduce nuance, when you can hold, you know, you know what I'm trying to say? This thing was totally unacceptable, and the individual who did it, actually, there was some, reasons behind why they did what they did. Some of which I can understand, some of which maybe I can't, and I can still say the whole effect was really bad. But that's nuance, and you've got to give some benefit of the doubt to people and have nuanced conversations. You're going to learn a lot if you do that. But I feel like Cliff went through that. Let me hit the end of these in the couple of minutes we got. Yeah, thank you, Matthew. It was Martha. Um, Steve said one of my favorite jobs that my dad did was a company called Keylab, which I know all the founders of that, Steve, including your dad, of course. They did that. They would take some of their systems and give them a spider virus to test their security. Yeah. Dave says a strong theme was that I know nothing about networks. um, right. Matthew said that Cliff's opinions changed even though it wasn't culturally normal at Berkeley. I mean, he had been indoctrinated to a certain kind of political viewpoint at Berkeley and then began to deviate from that, and it created tension in his relationship with his partner. Um, he stopped seeing the government, Brandon, as purely Big Brother. Yeah, Brandon making funny jokes about laxatives. Oh yeah, Brandon, I'm not even going to read that second quote, like out loud. Because the problem really comes down to you have to impute motivations to people, and most of the problems happen because somebody says something is taken out of context, and then because we view them as being all one way or all another way, we make them black and white. Then we can put them into a group of you know my favorite. I'm gonna go out on a line here, and this is the one that'll get me fired. One of my favorite groups of people is the so-called intellectual dark web, which includes, among other things, individuals, um, you know what I mean, people like Barry Weiss, who is lesbian, she's Jewish, she's a woman, and has been accused of being a Nazi because she's willing to have a conversation with known Nazi. No, not known Nazi. I'm being funny. See, you can't be funny. There's no humor. Chappelle was right. But what I'm trying to say is that there are people in that group. It's a very diverse group. It's diverse ethnically. It's diverse. Um, it's absolutely diverse politically. But what sort of unifies that group is the desire to have an honest conversation with people that you disagree with. And it was one of them who just jokingly said, this is the intellectual dark web, and everybody who gets like cast out, from their sort of like protected group, they get disowned, they get canceled by their own. They make their way over, you know, to the intellectual dark web. Um, anyway, thanks, Brandon. I know that I appreciate that you know that I'm the best. No, anyway, it's really hard to argue that you're being nuanced when someone decides that you're a Nazi. That's tough. Last thing, the meme on the left. I just want to say one last thing about writing. We're going to wrap. you have this impression that only new writers, step on the rake and smack themselves in the head with it. I really like the professional. Um, Dave, Dave wins the chat today. I want to congratulate you on that. But no, check out the professional writers. They're doing more, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, they still smack themselves in the face with the rake. They just do it a little more, artistically. So, all right, we're out of time. I got to scoot. You got to scoot. That kind of wraps up the Cuckoo's Egg. Next time we'll talk about open source. We'll get over to, no, actually, next week, I want to talk about intellectual property next week. It'll be weirdly like on time, and we'll save open source software and freedom of speech, which we did touch on freedom of speech quite a bit today. All right, my friends, stay safe. Go hug somebody. Get some oxytocin into your system. Get some vitamin D. Get out. If you need to chat, hit me up. Maybe I'm available. Maybe I'm not. I don't know. But I love you and want you to be successful and happy. Do the thing. And, good luck in your classes where there's a lot more rigor. And get your A in this class.